Hello and welcome to Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. My name is Ben Hauk, and I'm pleased to be able to introduce the 36th installment in our ongoing series. Our August 2025 episode features CORO trained coaches Keith Clark and Ted Delicath in conversation with IGS President Lance Strate. Their conversation centers on the CORO Fellows Program in Public Affairs and its relation to general semantics, and related topics such as leadership, governance, cybernetics, and journalism. Let's listen in.
Well, welcome to another episode of Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. I'm Lance Strate, and I'm here with Keith Clark and Ted Delicath, two coaches who are associated with the CORO leadership group. And it's great to have you both here. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance.
And maybe we'll just start out by getting to know the two of you a little bit, a bit about your background, where you're from, and how you came to this day and time. Keith, you want to start things off?
Yeah, happy to. And how I came to this day and time. I love the setup on that. Credit to Ted. I think any conversation or meeting that I join that he has orchestrated is one where usually there's a lot of intrigue, curiosity, and anticipation, because you never quite know what's going to come out of it, but you know it's going to be something fun and interesting. My background. So leading up to this point, you mentioned Ted and I share history, share connection with the CORO Fellowship in Public Affairs. So to put that in context, that was a program I signed up to do a couple years out of college. And so graduated Trinity College in Hartford, taught for 2 years, did some community organizing in East Boston.
And you're from Connecticut originally?
I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm one of the few folks who grew up out on Cape Cod, believe it or not.
Wow.
So after college, taught, and while I was doing the Citizen Schools Teaching Fellowship, came across a friend of mine, someone I had served in student government with at Trinity. He shared that he was doing the CORO Fellowship, and I had never heard of it, so I looked it up, read about it. There was a New York Times piece on it. And I said, this sounds incredible. What intrigued me about CORO initially was it's 9 months, 5 sectors. You work in a nonprofit, labor union, business, government agency, political campaign. You do a group project, and then you find and secure your last project. And you're doing it with 16 other folks. So I said this would be an amazing way to spend 9 months. And so I applied to it. We'll spend more time on CORO and the connections to general semantics kind of as we go through today. But after CORO, while I was there, I said, this is the program for me. I want to train this, and I want to help grow it. Did grad school in Pittsburgh, came back.
Where in Pittsburgh?
At Carnegie Mellon University.
Oh, okay.
They've got a great relationship with CORO. They recognize the experience, and therefore I was able to do a accelerated master's in public policy with them. So I couldn't say no to that. And then returned, trained at CORO and directed the program for 6 years, but then went on to DC and worked with a great group called the Partnership for Public Service. They have a Center for Government Leadership where they train federal leaders across the country. I worked there for a few years, and then our family, we moved to Atlanta. And at that time, I said I could never work remotely. This is 2018, so pre-COVID. So I gave my notice at the
words, right?
Right. So I gave my notice. I was finishing up a grant. We were doing some trainings in Northern California, and closed out those trainings, and then started looking for a job here in Atlanta. Somehow landed at the Home Depot. So there's a deeper story there. It all connects back to the inverted pyramid and servant leadership, but was able to spend 6 years with the company. That's where I went in deep with coaching as a profession. Went through certification, went through additional training.
certification through?
So while I was there, went through coach certification and training. And so that was to get accredited with the International Coaching Federation, ICF. It's the global body, governing body for all coaches to ensure, ethical practices within the profession. So Home Depot supported me to get certified. And so I did that while I was there, coached hundreds of associates, worked with teams, and over the last few years been able to now do that on my own. So coaching leaders, supervisors, folks on the front lines. I have a particular bend and passion for public servants, but coaching leaders and teams to be more effective. So that's what I've been up to.
That sounds really interesting. And of course, we'll get more into the CORO part, but I guess we'll turn it over now to Ted to hear your life story and how you came to be wherever it is you are now.
Yeah, Lance, I will just echo. There are very few people in the world that I get to meet that time bound a introduction. So thanks for that. Pretty great Friday. So Ted Delicath, I lead through self-deprecation. That's a Midwest hangover because I grew up in a small town in Illinois. I played some subpar D3 football and also was involved in politics and actually arrived to CORO because if you recall, and these without invoking politics were more tame times. I ran my first mayoral campaign for a town of about 80,000 at the age of 20. And if you recall, then the greatest political strife was between then President Obama and candidate hopeful Mitt Romney. And so what I noticed was I was being taught leadership by some folks who were really well-meaning on the more Democratic side of the aisle. And they were vilifying folks on the other side. And so you got a lot of abstractions, a lot of labels here that were particularly not sitting well with me, given I had grown up in a small place that was half black, half white, Peoria, Illinois. And so I was raised by people of all kinds of faiths and backgrounds. And so I started to notice myself shifting the way I saw the world, and I didn't really like that. And so as I was getting ready to graduate, I was looking for an experience that would neither be towing the party line or just send me straight to grad school, because I saw how that conveyor belt worked, and that you get out of there and you think you know something, and really you're walking away with degrees, and no real world experience. So as Keith said, the idea of having 6-7 internships over 9 months with people, and one of the things we'll talk about with CORO is you specifically cannot be partisan. I think that's one of the greatest gifts you can give a young person, is to be intellectually curious, not trying to be intellectually dominant. And so signed up, went to St. Louis, had a phenomenal 9 months. And as we can talk about, it was during that time that this ability to seek to be objective, right? We never will get there. Led me to go into the military, in part because I wanted to continue to try to learn leadership without a political ideology, and because we are in a general semantics podcast, the map is not the territory. So I wanted to do some land navigation, Lance. So I did that for 4 years, had a phenomenal experience, got out.
Which branch?
I was an infantry officer. I got to do the whole Ranger School thing and had a great time. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm still in the reserves today in military intelligence, which they even call me intelligence. So that's a low bar. So did that, got out, got a little bit of schooling, and spent 5 years. And I know consulting has a bad name specifically because words need to mean things, right? I worked for General McChrystal. He's got a methodology called Team of Teams, which is a fancy way of saying the world used to be much more hierarchical. We are much more matrix now. How can we help organizations get more flexible and empower their teammates rather than just giving rigid orders? So I got to do that for 5 years. It was a lot of fun. And I've recently transitioned, and I'm helping now as an advisor to try to get my citizenship muscle back. So I help with a group called Unite America. And you won't get me off my soapbox if I do that. So I will stay away for that for now.
But an advisor to who was that again?
Yeah, the group is called Unite America. They were started with the idea that one of the reasons we have such a polarized environment is that 87% of everyone that's elected in Congress today gets elected in the partisan primary, and many of those partisan primaries are closed. And so essentially those are publicly funded elections that keep people out that are citizens. So you pay for somebody else to get elected and then not represent you.
Oh, well, that sounds very worthwhile then.
Well, hopefully we'll see how it goes.
Okay. Well, and so you both met in St. Louis. Was that correct? What in the world were you doing in St. Louis?
So, Ted, help me out with the index on this, but the for the year of this, but at I met Ted when he was a candidate for the Fellows Program. One of the pretty incredible aspects of the program is a pretty intense and pretty long selection day, where after folks have applied, after folks have sent through references, after essays, resumes, et cetera, have all been reviewed, um, candidates are invited to participate in selection day. And it used to be at the St. Louis Rams training facility. I don't think, Ted, when you were a fellow or when you were a candidate, did you come to the Rams training facility, or was it
No,
somewhere? Was
Lance,
it
he's underselling how overwhelming this is, because at 21 you show up and it was in this massive, um, very commercial, where you go if there's a large gathering of consultants, and it was I forget where it was, but it was slightly downtown, and they tell you
okay?
nothing about it. They tell you when to show up and that you'll be
Yeah.
there for 12 hours.
Yep. So I think at that point we were using one of our corporate partners' headquarters downtown. But that was the neat thing for me, was when I was a candidate, they said come to selection day, and they don't tell you anything about it.
It was like being a draft pick.
Well, that's what I felt like, and then they send you the address and you show up, and it's the St. Louis Rams, it's terrible, the St. Louis Rams football team that's now in California. It was their training facility, and so you don't know whether you're going to take an exam, do an interview, or run sprints. But that was kind of the neat part of it. But that would have been Ted's selection day. At that time, I was director and trainer of the Fellows Program, and so I've been in St. Louis for a couple years at that point. Been directing and training the Fellows Program for a number of years, and so when Ted came as a candidate, um, that's when we first met. But then he chose to do the program, and we got to work together for 9 months. What would you add to that, Ted? That's my
Well,
version.
yeah, Lance, if there's a slight elevation there as well. The neat thing about CORO is there's actually satellite campuses. So I believe there's a CORO in St. Louis, LA, New York. Where else, Keith? Pittsburgh?
Well, if
Yep.
there are satellites, what's the main, I mean, is there a main like office or main center to it, or is it
No, so that's the
distributed?
interesting thing in Coro's history is it started in San Francisco. So it started in
Oh, okay.
California and then grew, and kind of, the founder was able to kind of build relationships and follow interest, curiosity, intrigue, and commitment to public service, which led to expanding to New York, expanding to St. Louis and Los Angeles, and also Pittsburgh. Um, Coro as it exists today, which I can't say with any authority because I have not been involved for a number of years, but only through as an alum and through awareness of it. They all run as separate nonprofit organizations.
I see.
And so they all have their own local boards, all have their own local leadership and staff, and they all run their programs based where, for us in St. Louis City County, metropolitan region, and while I led it, we got to expand into Missouri. That was our laboratory.
Yeah, that's very interesting because San Francisco was a kind of center for general semantics uh, back in the day, back when
Okay.
S.I. Hayakawa was
Yeah.
the was a professor, an English professor at San Francisco State.
Okay.
My old professor Neil Postman was there with him for 1 year.
Okay.
And of course, Hayakawa went on to be president of San Francisco State, and that kind of led him down the dark path when he called out the National Guard on student protesters, and which led him to become Republican senator from California for one term.
Wild.
But
Wild.
and for some time, there were still many people in San Francisco who were following general semantics. And it was the headquarters of the International Society for General Semantics for a long time until in about 20 or so years ago, it merged into the Institute.
Okay. It's super interesting. And, for me, I joined, or so I went through CORO in 2007, 2008. I then came back to train it in 2010 through 2016 or 2015, excuse me. But CORO goes back to the 40s.
Hmm.
And when I was kind of thinking about our conversation today, Lance, I grabbed, so San Francisco, one of the longtime trainers, he chaired the board at CORO, David Sibbett. He did a phenomenal job in editing and compiling a CORO history book. And I went through it today, and it mentions the relationship with general semantics, but it also calls out someone I'm not familiar with. I don't know if you are, but his name's Bill Pemberton.
Not striking a chord.
Okay. In what way?
I'm saying I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. And that's in addition to, what I've read, heard, folks have shared, just the founders, Don Fletcher, being connected to and introduced to general semantics, so much so that in St. Louis, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but one of the neat things that I learned as a fellow was Al Fleischman was a known general semanticist.
Right.
And he had a strong relationship. He had a great relationship with Don Fletcher, who started CORO. And when he would come to St. Louis, they would have seminars together.
I do remember he used to write a column
Yeah.
for, I think it was called Glimpse, was the newsletter for the International Society for General Semantics.
Okay.
So, I'm definitely, that name is very familiar.
Well,
I didn't know he was associated with CORO though.
no. So no, there was no like formal relationship or affiliation, but where it showed up is kind of the design of CORO is every fellows will work at a corporate placement or a business placement. But then there's another component to the program where fellows do interviews. So I think one of the unique things about the program, one of the things that I took to and also valued just as a fellow myself, is you don't go meet with folks, or you don't go sit in on classes, or you don't go get taught something. You go and sit with and interview folks,
Yeah,
people, citizens, leaders from every sector and from all across the community that you're working in and learning about.
that's really interesting.
And so it's your questions that drive the conversation. And it's something that, CORO had been in St. Louis for a couple decades. And so many leaders across nonprofit business, political spectrum, all looked forward to the CORO interview because they knew for an hour they would have 16 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, super curious folks just throwing questions at them based on kind of their curiosities, their interests. And so what I learned is that Al Fleischman would be one of the sort of notable CORO interviews because he was super passionate about general semantics. When it came time, so I think it was February of my CORO Fellows year, I got assigned my business placement, and I was sent for 5 weeks to work at Fleischman Hillard, which is the global communications firm. And it was amazing because I walked in the door and everyone would just start coming up to my desk and being like, "Hey, I heard you're a CORO fellow. I used to work with Al on this," or I got to meet Al Fleischman once, and they would just assume I knew Al Fleischman or I knew of him, but the relationship was so strong that they would be kind of sharing their stories of Al Fleischman, but then exploring like, "Hey, so general semantics, you're getting taught this or this or that," and then you go into a conference room, and I remember it. One of their conference rooms was the Korzybski room, I think, And
Wow.
I might be that don't hold me to that, but on the plaque on the wall was a quote from Al Fleischman, which was, you know, my understanding of general semantics, or my take on general semantics, is saying what you mean with a minimum amount of noise.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the quote and I was like, hey, Al Fleischman knows general semantics. This is wild. So there was like just a lot of alarm bells going off for me being at Fleischman Hillard, being exposed to Al Fleischman, who had written books, written articles, talked about general semantics a lot. He even did seminars, I think, with youth in the city, and just having a lot of fun with it, but introducing it and supporting folks to practice it and building a really reputable communications firm while doing it too.
That's really amazing to hear about this connection. I'm really glad to be learning about this. And when you said the interviews, I can't help but wonder, did you get some training in how to ask interview questions? Was that part of the program? You're nodding your head.
Well, Keith is just staring at me, Lance, because he's going to
Oh.
make me answer this one, because Keith taught me on the questions. So a couple of things show up in this. So if you think about the semantic transactor and abstraction, week by week, we would have these seminars where Keith, one of the fascinating aspects of CORO, Lance, is that Keith was our trainer, and he took that title to mean I, being Keith, was not going to answer many, if at all, personal questions. So there, the map was closer to the territory, and that he was living into a role, and that allowed him to be a trainer first, and that put a lot of the onus on us to learn. So it's an important aspect to understand. In each week when you're showing up at a seminar, we would have a new tool. And so we would learn about the semantic transactor, we'd learn about abstraction, we would learn about WeGo, and then we would learn about why was such a detrimental question in actually trying to uncover what you're seeking to understand. And so Keith would lead us through why is a false equivalence. To your background, A is not equal to A. And so we would learn instead, how can we identify the assumptions that may be boiled into a question? And we would then call back and call back and call back. And so I can remember explicitly, we actually went and had a conversation in DC. And in that conversation, and I'll never forget this, it was a group that had a stance on the life of a fetus and the life of a baby. And I remember asking a question that some of my classmates were not happy with afterwards. And that was because the approach had led me to think more fundamentally about what exactly we were talking about. And I asked, what is the value day before and the day after that this thing I call a child is born? And the person in the room with we were speaking gave what I felt like was more of a stock answer that was not directly answering the question. And I then noticed, being taught in general semantics favors the specificity of a question. And if you are only given abstractions that are not answering the question, you notice when those two things are not aligned. That's not to say mine is right or that was wrong. We actually weren't answering or asking the same question. We were on two different planes, right?
Right. But you said that why just to clarify, you mean questions that say like, why are you doing this, or why is this happening?
Yeah, I think you said we weren't allowed to say why, correct?
Yeah. So to the training piece, particularly as they got underway with interviews, one of the kind of best things to experience as a trainer was the first 6 weeks where they're doing 3, 4, or 5 interviews every Friday, different folks across the community. And as a class, they're also getting to know each other, and they're also learning to work together. And as their trainer, I'm saying like, hey, so interviews are part of this program. Here are some methods for effective interviewing, which would include asking, 4WH questions, open-ended questions of who, what, where, when, how, and just saying, let's set why aside. You can have why back at the end of 9 months. And every class I've trained, the results, the outcomes, the learning, it's worth it. I'm going to invite you to try that, and go with me on it. So I gave him that invitation, slash it was a requirement of the program.
I just
But-
want to, this is really great to hear because, again, from my end, Neil Postman often emphasized the idea of asking good questions. And of course, this is in the context of education, but and he would say that when they tell you there's no such thing as a bad question, that's like the worst thing you can say, because there are bad questions and there are good questions, and including open-ended versus closed kinds of questions. But that was very big for him.
Well, so from a training standpoint, I love hearing that, Lance, because to me that was what I was inviting them to step into, but also knew that if they committed to it, if they practiced it, which it was just routine into the program. So there was just numerous opportunities for them to step into a conversation or an interview and then debrief it and say, like, hey, what questions yielded the most learning? And they could then reflect on, oh, what types of questions am I asking, right? And so on the general semantic sense, it's like they were questioning their questioning. So bringing a level of awareness to their thinking, bringing a level of awareness to their curiosity, which then allowed them to drive their learning at rapid speed. And so I think there was a number of pieces to it, how they prepped for interviews, what they, how they carried the interview, what they noticed, right? Because one of the things about CORO is the value of the interview is you get to experience the whole person and you get to see them in the moment. And so debriefing an interview, the first interview they do, 16 folks walk out of a room and they're like, oh, that was awesome. Oh, that was great. Oh, that was okay. No, that was boring. And you get 16 varied opinions. As they progress, they start to get into how effective were the questions? What observations did we pick up on? And what did you see that I didn't? Right. And so it's like, what color tie was this person wearing? What did you notice about when they paused? Right. And so there would be just a higher level of awareness to the full experience, which they were doing that as a class. It also supported them to then go do that on their placements.
Wow. And how big was the class?
So in St. Louis, we had 16 fellows every year. I think it's now, and with other centers, they stayed at 12, or typically it's about 12 folks. And I think St. Louis around 12 now these days. I'm not totally certain on that, but at the time I was training, we were training 16 fellows a year, full time, 9 months.
Yeah. And, we sort of skipped around here, but CORO, and that's CORO. Any idea of where that name comes from?
I love it. So that's the beautiful thing is as soon as you say you're going to do CORO, people start saying, oh, what does it stand for? Oh, what does it mean? So Van Dunn Dodge, Don Fletcher, the two founders of CORO, when they decided to start this organization, they wanted a name like Haagen-Dazs that was free from prior associations. And so they chose CORO because it represented exploration and discovery. So not an acronym, not something that kind of short or stood for something more, something with no prior associations that folks could step into, live into, and experience for themselves. How's that land from a general semantics standpoint?
Well, from a general semantics standpoint, I guess it's a kind of blank map in a way.
Beautiful.
But I'm also bringing some media ecology and, think about the sound of it, and it does have that sound of the word core in it, which does have certain connotations.
Interesting. Yeah. That was always, a common struggle for most fellows, is just describing what it is, saying what it stood for. or even just letting folks know, like, yeah, hey, this is not an acronym. But also like, hey, this is not a singing group. We're not here to perform,
Not a
which,
boy
believe it or
band.
not, that showed up a lot, especially in the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, so I guess we got into you telling us about the the program itself. So you want to tell us some more? And how are the fellows selected, by the way?
So again, yeah, this is, I'm pretty sure it's still pretty consistent. Might still be true. During my time, it's a national selection process, national application process. It's, historically been ultra competitive as a fellowship, just because there are so few spots, um, and it is such a, rigorous and sort of, there's no training like it. So you have folks that tend to apply, or that would apply typically over the course of, you know, um, November through October through January, I feel like, was the typical application cycle. And with that, they're writing essays, pulling in recommendations, and pulling together, the typical application package, um, that then leads to a like a community of reviewers, reading through their applications, and then looking at folks, or bringing folks together for what Ted and I shared about, a 1-day sort of selection day, of, number of exercises, interviews, activities, just to see how folks see how folks work together, see how folks think, and see how they relate to, um, what they might be seeking in a program like CORO. And then through that, again, a community panel of folks that are going to review every candidate, to bring together a class that is going to be able to make the most of those 9 months. And so a couple things were sort of always important, and that was intellectual curiosity, and a reflection of that, an experience or interest in leadership and what it takes to lead, and then a commitment to public service.
Ted, what did the process look like from your end?
Yeah, Lance, Keith is making it seem far more chill than what it felt like as an applicant. The neat thing about CORO, it does actually get people from a range of age spectrum. So I would say the majority of folks are probably applying as they're going through their senior year. However, you get people 2, 3, 4, and
Yep.
then there's a few folks 5, 6, 7, 8 years out, and it
Yep.
tracks a wider range. I think that's important, just so far as they do a great
Huge.
job of curating the diversity. And so for mine, went to a little D3 school in the Midwest. And so got invited to come down to St. Louis. Again, you get, Lance, I send you a cryptic email and you just know where to go, what you should show up as, and at what time. It also happened that I had to fly out the next day. So
This isn't like the Squid Game, is it?
it felt like a Squid Game, Lance. Lance, I felt like it was a Squid Game. I thought I was going to show up and they were going to give me a number and not use my name. And so you get there, and I would say, because they were seeking to get 16, I was put in a group of either 8 or 10, and there was about 6 or 7 pods of us. No one, everyone, and because I have a little military background now, it's fascinating that the similarity between how you, when you go through some of your special forces selection, your trainers don't give you any subjectivity. So
Yep.
everybody that brought us through that day, Lance, they didn't say good, bad, they didn't smile, they weren't mean. They were just these placid figures. And so they would take you from one room to another. And I don't know if I'm supposed to give away any of the secret sauce. I'll just give you.
I think it's no. I mean, I think it's just that piece of kind of what you mentioned, Ted, of it's like nothing you've kind of ever experienced. Even folks that had kind of fought their way through the ranks of Goldman Sachs came and would do a selection day and say, "I've never been through anything like this."
Wow.
And it was just designed with that level of intentionality. I, you know, Ted and I both experienced CORO, and my time leading it was all pre-COVID and all pre kind of virtual existence. And so I don't know kind of how much
Right.
still holds up holds up now, but definitely just a rigorous day that is interdisciplinary, collaborative, individual. I think one of the neat things about it is, in St. Louis, we engaged 100 volunteers as judges. And so when you showed up to interview, and this is what struck me as a candidate, is as you're going through interviews, you're just seeing new face after new face after new face. And then the day ends and you see the full audience of volunteers who've been part of the day. And it's 100 folks that are from all walks of life, 100 folks from all sectors, 100 folks from all offices across, nonprofit, business, et cetera, et cetera. And you're saying, okay, if I do this program, I get to meet, work with, learn from all these folks. So I think that's one piece to it that's pretty definitely hard to do, but also just really incredible.
Yeah. Ted, and anything more on what you went through, the hazing process, as it seems to be?
It is a very effective hazing because I think it startles you in a productive way. I will just say strongly +1 what Keith said there. And I would be remiss, Lance, there's a few things on some of the tools that we learned because Keith, maybe you can talk a little bit about this. Keith learned his training from another person he holds in high regards. And Lance, our methodology or pedagogy, whatever the fancy word is a mix of general semantics and then other tools that they blended together. So I think that could be potentially fruitful, Keith.
Sure, let's hear about it.
I think one, the level of mastery that I was trained at is nothing I've come across since. And this is like I've been kind of in the leadership development space, in the coaching space, in the experiential learning space for now almost over 15 years. And my trainer just operates at a completely different level. And it's largely her she comes from the framework of general semantics. And so for me, I got to experience that as a fellow.
So when you say your trainer, is there just one person
Yeah.
assigned to the group of 12, say?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So the typical structure of the program is you'd have 12 fellows, you have someone manage it, and then you would have someone train it. Because the training, it's a key component to the program. You're working full time. So you're doing these placements Monday through Friday, regular work schedule. And then you're having your seminars Tuesday nights, and then also Friday and most Fridays. And it's
just to clarify, because among the highest level abstractions are pronouns. So when you say you're working full time, you mean the fellows who are attending it. So they're not quitting their day jobs, but they're coming in for the seminar in the evening. Is that what you're saying?
So yeah, when a fellow commits to do CORO,
Yeah,
they commit to move to that city,
right.
live and participate as a CORO fellow full time.
Okay.
And as a CORO fellow, they'll then be assigned to a different nonprofit organization, labor union, business, government agency, political campaign. They'll do a group project, and then they'll do a project that they secure on their own. That's their full-time job.
Okay, so that is part of the program.
That's a core element to the program is, 30, 40 hours a week they're in the field, right? They're in the work of this particular foundation or this particular nonprofit agency or this particular, local city office. So they're working full time on real projects, hands-on projects, substantive projects.
Paid then?
So it varies by center, and it definitely has probably changed since my time. But it's a stipend-based program, and so depending on what they're coming in with, depending on kind of their background and their financial need, kind of each of the centers doles out or supports fellows with some sort of living stipend.
I see.
Yeah.
So they're doing these placements during the day and then having a seminar once a week. Was that?
Yeah. So they're at their placements, and then fellows come together. Fellows would come together Tuesday nights and then most Fridays. And so that Tuesday night seminar would be a chance to introduce new training, introduce some new tools, check in on placements, right? Because all of these fellows are coming into this program as learners, not knowers. And so they're not on their placements with the expertise the placement wants or needs. They're at their placements from the space of, hey, I'm here to learn and I'm here to contribute as best I can. And I'm going to learn a ton and hopefully produce, exceptional results. And so those Tuesday seminars were great opportunities to check in, but also provide kind of what I would now consider to be training, coaching, and support so that they can be more effective, both as learners and as doers. And then the Friday seminars, that would be their space to work as a group, connect as a group, but also be out in the city or out across the community having those interviews. And the interviews would be with different leaders from each sector. Sorry, Lance.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But is that how it worked for you, Ted, then?
Yep, I was lucky enough to have Keith as my trainer. Maybe to give you a flavor of the specificity there, Lance.
Yeah.
The first week
bring it down in order of abstracting.
Yeah. So orientation week, right? That can mean so many things. Orientation showed up like this for us. We got there, Lance. There's 16 of us. We're all in suits that don't necessarily fit because we're 21 to 23-year-olds that have no money. And the orientation is the prompt, and Keith, fill in where I get it wrong, is you are going to go learn about a community. You have 1 week to go ask as many questions and have as many interviews as possible. On that Friday, we have reserved you this community center. You will invite as many people from the community as you can, and you will tell them about their community. And so 16 kids, Keith drops that packet and you go. And you go to have as many conversations as possible. And you try to think of, well, if a community is this abstraction, how would we decompose it in ways that are specificity, bring a narrative to it, and how can we talk about this intelligibly given that we don't live here? And that was the orientation to the program.
So I want to build on that with you, Lance, just to sort of flavor in. And this is like, I will tell you, a lot of this learning for me took a few years and like the insights came years later. But one of the things where how CORO and the founders connected with general semantics is what, we would now recognize as pretty overused, pretty ubiquitous term of leadership and leading. They reflected on they related to as governance. And so when you bring a group together, how do you get them to orient as a group? So you put them on a project, send them off on their own, and let them figure out how to work effectively as a group. And so they're doing that in their first week and getting deep exposure to the city or the municipality that they're immersed in. But they're also getting immersed in how they function as a particular entity, which then opens the door for the rest of the 9 months to how are you all relating individually, or like your self-awareness, what's being shaken here, what's being questioned here, or what's being opened up for you here. There's also how are you working as a group, and what are you noticing about what it takes to work effectively as a group, and that transcends across the 9-month experience. To me, in a really incredible way, is what Ted described as that first 6-day logic study. The lessons, the essence of it is what carries through that full 9-month program.
You said logic study?
Yeah.
What exactly?
Exactly. It's another because if we called it a community study, folks would go in with a particular background or association that may or may not be right, or may not be effective or relevant. A logic study is just what's the logic of this particular town or neighborhood, which it means that, for Ted and his class, no one could say, oh, I've done this before. I've done one of these community studies before, or I've done a needs assessment, or I've done a strategic planning process. Everyone's like, what is a logic study? Well, I guess we're going to get to learn about the political, social, spiritual dynamics of a community. Cool. How do we do that? It's like, well, what questions do we have? So they all figure it out, but what you raised, that question, Lance, what you raised right off the bat is the tension that they experience right out of the gate, which is, I should know what this is. I don't think I know what this is. How do we move forward?
Well, Ted, what was your experience then with this logic study?
As somebody that is a type A who likes to control too much, Lance, it was deeply unnerving to start with. I will say that, to Keith's point, they set that structure so well in that none of us has an edge on the other one, especially as you're coming into a new group. Those dynamics have to be found out accordingly. And because everyone's a novice, there's no power dynamic other than, well, let's define this thing. Let's try to figure out what questions we're going to ask. And you very quickly get into the map is not the territory. And you start to see the biases, Lance, because, the logic I understand this community as is, I was a political science nerd. So obviously we should go talk to the government. And somebody else that had the beauty, Lance, is there's 16 of us. Each of us has a very different background. Somebody else would be like, well, Ted, no offense, I grew up in a place like this and I never saw anybody from the government. So I'm going to go talk to somebody in grassroots organizing. And you start to understand, these are the blind spots that you would come to understand with general semantics, and the fact that how you understand the word is not at all how somebody else understands the word.
And
so,
can I just build on that, Lance? I mean, the beautiful thing, right, is, hey, bring together folks from this community that you've spent 6 days in. Tell them what you've learned, right? Which immediately challenges them into, well, we're not in a space to be experts on this particular community. We're also not in the space to tell them what's so. And so it immediately puts them in that place of learning of the process and learning of where they're experiencing it and can therefore share and speak to it, which, if you're not getting right to the we go, then you're really missing out on it. And you're also presenting or potentially setting yourself up to be challenged. And so that's, I think, one of the nature of the design of the program is, the we go tool, what is going on, is introduced really early. And it's something that helps folks find some grounding so that they can then start to step into, I'm going to set my opinion aside, or I'm going to set my assumption aside, or my interpretation aside, and stick to, or at least speak to, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you grounded WeGo, because not everyone would necessarily catch that or even be familiar with that of our listeners. But there's that question, what is going on, is one of the great questions in general semantics. Ted, I'm wondering, you gave that one example. I'm wondering if you have some other examples of what your logic study came up with. I mean, don't have to be overly specific, but just to, again, just to make it a little bit more concrete.
Yeah, and Lance, that logic study that happens in that first week, and then just to reemphasize, you do 6 or 7 placements, and the neat thing is, not to over theorize some of this, John Dewey also plays a part in some of how CORO shows up. So there's a lot of experiential nature. So rather than going to grad school, I went to CORO. CORO put me in 6 different placements in every sector. And so, to give you some specificity that I think is interesting, I got to work at a mining company. I did 5.5 weeks at a mining company going down to mines. And so I had a a very loosely held, general, superficial understanding of I love the environment, mining bad. And
Yeah.
I had to suspend that because I had to be nonpartisan. One, got to meet phenomenal people. Two, got to understand something that I had such a superficial understanding of, and it exposed how hollow my opinion was. And so, and also, I'm sure, I don't know exactly where this would show up in general semantics. Maybe it's just a more human point. When you meet really lovely people that are doing things, it makes it much harder to abstract on them because it personalizes it, makes it very concrete. So
Yeah.
that was one. And then I'll tell you one, Lance, that was probably the most fun I had, which was I got put with a gentleman who is on the Republican side of the spectrum, inside of Missouri, inside of their Senate. And he had, and I don't know if Keith did this on purpose, he probably had, if I have opinions and he has opinions, his opinions were more or less on the opposite side of how I could understand my opinions.
I hear
And
you.
and Coro asks, okay, what is going on? Ted, you don't get to show up as a partisan, so you just get to be curious. And so I sat with him for an entire week in the legislature, Lance, and all I got to do was ask questions, and none of those questions could be why. And I would say if I got of the greatest compliment I got while I was a CORO fellow, Lance, when I got done, he said, I actually don't know what you think. And I was like, yes, let's go. Fantastic. Because that means the learning mode was there. And so
Yeah.
I'm forever grateful for those particular placements, Lance.
Well, and asking good questions, once again, I just brought this up in tribute to someone else, but that was for Neil Postman, that's the highest praise.
Yeah.
Is that you ask good questions. More important than the answers. Answers
Yep.
can change, but good questions are forever.
It's funny when you asked about my grad school experience, and when I was there, got to know a few folks in the administration, and I would ask them just what's Carnegie Mellon's role. And at that time, their response was, well, we're known as the answer machine. And we want to be known as the petri dish that is asking the questions. Um, and so that was, to me, like, as a trainer, when I went back, every class there would be some where it would catch on really quick. They would
Yeah.
leave an interview, and they would and the interviewer or the person they met with on their own would say, "Ooh, they asked some really, really effective questions." And just to sort of brag on one class in particular, they met with the United States Attorney General, full
Wow.
hour. And on the way out, his press secretary chased us down and says, "Where the heck are you all from?" Those were some of the most effective questions he's been asked in his entire tenure. And I'll tell you, it was like the class could have cried in joy, right? Like, they were so proud of themselves, but they also immediately looked at me and were like, "See, we're doing it." But
Wow.
there's, a real value to that piece, and that, like, those were the core outcomes of the program: is be a better listener, think in questions,
Right.
and from taking general semantics further, is seek to live as your word.
Yeah. But you mentioned listening, and that's so important as well. That's a big area. And it's relatively new, I think, in the general semantics orbit. But one of our trustees, Mary Lehman, who does courses sometimes online on her own, and sometimes as part of our summer seminar, with us, with others of us. But listening is one of the areas that she's sort of brought into the fold. Um, in terms of general semantics training, and actually I'm got another connection. I'm associated with it's the Global Listening Center, which is all about that, and just did a piece for them. But some of this goes back to Wendell Johnson, one of the pioneers, who one of his books was Your Most Enchanted Listener, by which he meant yourself.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's
But
super fascinating. I'm curious, like what you're exploring, what you're curious about, what you're working on with. You said the Global Society for Listening,
it's the Global Listening Center.
Global Listening Center.
Yeah, and well, I mean, they're doing a lot of support work for listening in all different kinds of areas, not just academic. But I just wrote a piece, so it's just really um, saying here's how general semantics applies to listening. Going back to some of the basics that we've been talking about.
Okay,
But
I'm
I
gonna have
can't
to read
help.
that.
Yeah, I can't help but think about, as also being a kind of media person, how much journalists could really benefit from the kind of training that you're referencing here,
Well,
especially you see on TV these days.
yes, Lance, I would be remiss. There's two. Keith, you'll have to remind me. He was a very handsome gentleman in the class before me. He was with NPR.
Hmm.
And then one of my classmates is now, I forget where she's at now, but Laura Brinkman. I would say, Lance, first, I think anybody can benefit from general semantics as a training philosophy. You're just going to be a more interested human. And specifically on the questions front, I know Laura found it effective as a
Yeah,
training.
yeah. And there was, I think it was Robert Merrill was his name, was actually a professor of journalism and he brought in general semantics in relation to the ethics of journalism,
Hmm.
which is again, making good maps,
Yep.
accurate maps of the territory, which I think, as you've been pointing out, I mean, part of it means to let go of your biases and journalism itself was following the example of science it's in following the ideal of objectivity, which
Mhm.
is unattainable in an absolute sense, but still something that we can strive for, which is again what you've been referencing here.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'd be curious, Lance, if you've explored this or noticed or well researched it or looked into it. But one of the things that's been intriguing to me is, and this is as Ted mentioned, we have one of the issue weeks as a CORO fellow would be a media week. So we would
Mhm.
do an agriculture week, we would do a media week, we would do a state government week, um, and a number of fellows would go on to careers in journalism. One of the things that's been really intriguing to me is more and more journalists now are seeking to accurately share like in sharing the map. They're also
Yeah.
sharing, and me as a map maker, here was
Mhm.
my experience covering this story.
Uh-huh.
And so until our conversation today, I hadn't really considered it from that sense, but it's incredible to see that distinction, that self-reflection, that self-awareness can
Yeah.
show up in the sectors where it's most valuable, where it's most essential.
Well, that brings up a very interesting kind of question about whether they ought to be doing that or not. And certainly in terms of the principle of self-reflexiveness, that, is one of the three main non-Aristotelian principles. I the idea that a map would the most accurate map would contain the map itself within the map, but it would also contain either the map maker or map user within itself. So that would follow. The other side of the coin, and this is the media ecology part of things, is that really comes into play once television becomes the dominant medium, and that's like the new journalism uh, with folks like Tom Wolfe, who make their own experience and their own presence part of the story, which is unavoidable on television if you think about it, because the newscaster, I mean, that person's face and voice and all of that, I mean, it's unavoidable. Whereas when you're reading the news in print,
Yep.
it's very easy to have no sense at all of there being a person behind it, of it being completely impersonal and thereby objective. There's a bit of debate about which is the right way to go with that, but uh, very interesting nonetheless to consider. And interesting to learn that there are some folks in journalism who have come through your program.
And Lance, you've opened the door a little bit, so I'd be remiss if I did not ask. I know that you are Postman taught you, and then obviously you're aware of McLuhan. If you would indulge us a little bit, the map is not the territory, the medium is the message. How should we be understanding that as an extension of general semantics, and that the form itself, what is being left out is usually saying more than what is being left, and how it's curated matters? How have you thought about that? Where would you point us to?
Oh, sure. And this would probably take a lot more than what we can do in the podcast. But just in terms of the medium as the message, we would consider then what is it about maps that are a medium, and what is the particular bias of the map itself that results in a certain kind of appearance and a certain kind of product that is different from, say, some other way of mapping the territory. So I put it down to the question of how do we map the territory and how we go about it. And it goes back to questions, asking good questions, but the question of how to me is paramount, and that's the essence of media ecology. Is how we do things will determine what we do, what we end up with doing that, and who we are, who we become by doing those things.
Yeah, who we become raises the level of what you should be ingesting. So thank you for saying it in that particular way, because what we are taking in is what we become.
And speaking of that, since we've gone on to that, becoming a leader. What does that mean? What is, from the CORO point of view, what is a leader? Are leaders born or made? What is leadership? I know that's bad general semantics, saying what is it, but I'm just trying to provoke a reaction here or provoke some dialogue. I hope you'll forgive that.
I love it. Ted, do you want to have some fun with it first, or do you want me to go?
You start and then throw it on over. And then Lance, we're not going to let you walk away either, because you've been thinking about this as well. So you have to play if we're all going to play.
I love it. So I want to hit it on kind of three notes. One is I've always struggled with leadership as a term, as a word, because it immediately creates a false distinction, or it immediately creates a false category, in my opinion. And so kind of in my experience through CORO and through kind of trainings and things like that, coming across Peter Senge, one of the things he describes it as, if you go back to the root of the word, it's actually threshold. So thinking of crossing a threshold. And so from a coaching standpoint, from a leadership development standpoint, I've always sought to reframe it for folks as, what's your current threshold and what are the thresholds you're seeking to cross? And what I really loved about CORO and really valued about it is CORO, it was, I think, because a lot of cities at the time were building their leadership St. Louis class or their leadership San Francisco or leadership New York, they saw some overlap, which then led to CORO centers bringing on terms like the CORO Center for Civic Leadership. And so they pulled in leadership as a way to sort of language it for folks. In reading Don Fletcher's work, in learning about him, it was all about governance. It was all about citizenship, and citizenship being something that is not bestowed, or citizenship being something that is actually inherent. Because what's inherent is our ability to go with your direction, Lance, of the how we get information, how we present ourselves, how we work with others in groups, how we listen, how we evaluate. and how we adapt to like a fast changing situation, et cetera, et cetera. And so in substituting leadership with governance, you can then place yourself in the space of how do you self-govern? Like in the like
Mhm.
you know
Yeah.
like to one of the things you've called out before of just as an aware as a self-aware human being, as you reflect on where you're sitting, what are you aware of, what are you then adjusting, what are you then choosing to what are you self-determining, which is then leading to governance, which is then leading to self-transcendence. And so those are the layers that I've related to it that to me made it more accessible, made it more workable, and also made it more effective with the different groups that we got to work with. That would be my bend on it.
Okay. Ted?
Lance, great question, because the access you just got, I don't think Keith has ever told me his definition of leadership or kind of how he taps to it. So that was awesome. And that was a bit of a gift for me. So I appreciate that. I'll offer a few points that I don't think were hit there, and I'm not entirely sure because it changes frequently for me. One of the concepts I thought about a lot, Lance, when I was in CORO is this idea of I need to have, then I can do, and then I can be. So I need to possess something, and then I'll start doing those things, and then I can be this thing. I can be this leader. There's this ethereal, platonic, whatever
Beautiful.
word out there, and there's a flip to that, which is be. State that you are a leader today. Start doing the things that you think are in alignment with that noun or that label, and then you can have the outcomes of what you think is aligned to that. That has been something, whether I'm trying to be a partner, a teammate, the being of and the alignment really only comes through the action. So one of the things that you've raised with this, Lance, is there's the description of leadership, and there's also just the evidence of it when you're like, oh, that's it. And it's the evidence of it that says more than any description we could ever give, right? And then if it's helpful, a couple of other frames, and they'll go quickly. One, management versus leadership. Management, getting things done. Leadership is about some undestined future that requires all of us and that makes us uncomfortable to go towards. I like that idea. Then this idea of leadership having some component of service and sacrifice. If it's a vanity exercise, it's not leadership. That's just called a cult. And if it doesn't ask something of you, I think that. And then I would be remiss. The U.S. Army has many faults with it, and I actually like its definition, and they ingrain it in you. And it's the process of influencing people by, let me see if I get this right, purpose, by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish something that requires all of us and is more than any one of us. And that has always resonated with me as well. So.
That, that does seem to come up. I mean, I seem to recall in their recruitment advertising, just,
Yep.
like training leaders of tomorrow or that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I mean, it's interesting, Keith bringing up governance and self-awareness, because that, for me, that brings to mind cybernetics, which, the idea of it, especially as it was approached by Gregory Bateson, who was someone who was also influenced by general semantics, and with and so that self-reflexiveness, that kind of quality, but that cybernetics is this sort of feedback process where I mean, Norbert Wiener, who coined the term, or is often credited with coining the term, refer to it as the science of control, but that a lot of it is about self-control. And a lot of that aspect gets lost with with people who freak out about the idea of, oh, you're trying to control things, sort of thing. But when he coined the term, or he explained the origin of the term, it comes from the Greek word kyber, which is the same root as govern, right?
Oh,
So that
wow.
control, govern, right? And the word, the root, the Kyber originally referred to the steersman, the person on the boat who controlled the rudder. But that's where
Huh.
govern and government comes from, as well as this idea of cybernetics, which is kind of using feedback to control systems, and including your own system.
Yep. Yep.
So just interesting to get that connection. But I don't suppose Bateson came up at all with in CORO, in
New
that
to me.
work. Hmm?
Lance,
Or
post-Coro,
cybernetics.
I got into Donella Meadows and a few folks that are in that particular information and information system space. And I also read a gentleman called Dan Davies, who did a big book on cybernetics. And so I learned a ton that I had never understood, specifically that I think Chile, before the overthrow, tried to implement the first ever cybernetic system. And it was fascinating. You just connected that I never had put together, which was what they sought to do was to take away the word as leadership as an individual understanding and make it a collective noun. And it was cybernetics that was potentially going to do that, which Keith, I wonder if that actually goes a little with Senge, like an emergent system could be leadership rather than any one title being a leader.
Wow. Yeah, this is all new. Cybernetics is a new term for me. So you guys are having fun. I'm listening.
Well, I will say and this actually goes back to how I first learned about CORO was, when I first got involved with the Institute, and I just did a little research and looked at, and, one of the things that came up were, where general semantics, what it influenced in term. And again, I mean, I was certainly well aware of its influence in my field of communication studies and in media ecology as well. But another area, or another kind of, and really related to coaching in a way as well, neurolinguistic programming. Neurolinguistic programming was based in part on general semantics, and in part bringing in Gregory Bateson and the kinds of psychological work that followed what he was doing in relational kind of communication, and sort of the psychology of relationships, as Paul Watzlawick coming after that, and some others. And that's also where I saw, okay, and another kind of place or another group where general semantics had been a big influence was, and it was referred to as I recall, and I mean, this is about maybe 20 years ago. So it was referred to as CORO leadership training. I read about it, but it seems like that went through a name change, at least for St. Louis, or
Yeah.
overall.
Yeah, St. Louis itself as a center has been through multiple like organizational transitions, and been housed at different places. And so its name has kind of changed at least a couple times.
Yeah, because I see, like, just leader as a term, or leadership as a term that it elicits semantic reactions.
Yep.
Where you wonder, well, some people, oh yes, I'm a leader, so I'm going to go, and get involved. And others, I could never see myself as a leader. That's that has nothing to do with me. And there, so there's a kind of self-selection that would go into this.
Yeah. And that, I think that was one of the innate struggles of it, is as CORO started to kind of identify itself with that sort of leadership movement, or that kind of the emergence of leadership development as a domain or as an area of study. It's a tough term to keep track of, right? Because there's a couple thousand books on leadership published every day. And the words keep changing, and how much has really changed in terms of what it takes to be an effective human, right? In terms of how we govern ourselves, how we govern our families, how we govern within our communities and globally. So to me, that's been one of, like I said, one of the helpful reframes through CORO, to help pull itself back away from this idea that you need to go here to become a leader.
But finding a better map for the territory that CORO represents.
Yeah. And that was, I mentioned Don Fletcher a few times, and one of the, his piece was citizen liaison is all citizenship is being innate, and not something that is kind of transposed or transferred over. It's more, these are capacities that we have as humans, and this is what separates us. And it's also where the space for new possibilities exists in terms of kind of the roots of the program are, what is it going to take for this democratic experiment to work? And so how can you not treat it as an experiment, and not seek to learn?
And civic engagement is very important.
For sure.
Well, what else can you tell us about the program? Is there more about the connection to general semantics, or, have we covered it? Are there other aspects of the program you'd like to bring up?
I'm thinking on it. And so if there's anything that jumps to mind for you, Ted, feel free to go in. To me, where I've been sitting for the last 20 minutes, to be honest with you, Lance, has been the questions I have for you, and the work and the Institute, just because, what I'll share is I went through CORO, and I knew, and when, I knew it was part of the program. And I was part of the class where we were questioning it every step of the way. What is general semantics? What's this all about? And our trainer just kept reminding us, stick with the process, go with it, try it, see what you can learn, see what happens, right? And we actually had an issue seminar that we chose to focus on general semantics. And believe it or not, we interviewed Bruce Kodish as
Oh,
part of it. And I reached out to Steve Stockdale because I found him on the internet, and this was like
okay.
2008, right? So
Yeah.
and he connected me with Steve. We got to interview Steve as part of that day. And I remember my trainer saying, like, guys, like, you've been resisting the methodology for 6 months, and now you're choosing to kind of spend one day on it. Fast forward, I graduate from the program. Bruce sent me his book, and I have some time, have some space. I read through the book, and I'm like, holy smokes! Everything that he's written in Drive Yourself Sane is what we experienced as a class, and it's what we experienced as a trainer, or as a fellow. So one of the things that I've been curious about in our time together, Lance, and want to hope you'll indulge us on this one, is for you. You've mentioned, the field of communications and the relevance of general semantics in that. Have you noticed, or where have you noticed general semantics playing a really interesting role in how, um, in a particular field or in a particular discipline, just in terms of how it's offered or how folks are trying it or applying it? Because I know you go all over the world and you get to visit with different institutes globally, and you get to see how folks relate to general semantics. What are the relationships that you've seen with general semantics that are interesting or surprising?
Well, that's kind of a tall order there. It's just in my
I'm not. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, in my field, it was very much a part of my early curriculum as a student, and it kind of got lost to a large extent, and with a lot of the sort of humanities and non-empirical social sciences and things kind of shifted over into sort of critical cultural studies and and some of the really useful stuff from general semantics did get lost, but that's part of what we're bringing back in a lot of the work that we're doing. Which includes, having brought back for 3 years now the summer seminar where we do like a 3-day kind of all-day course in general semantics with a lot of folks from, actually some interest in folks from philosophy, and gotten a bit of following in Latin America, which is very nice for us. And as I mentioned, media ecology, which is communication centered, but it's had a big impact. Again, because we're thinking about the impact of language as a medium of communication. And general semantics has a lot to contribute to that. We also have a longstanding concern with perception. A lot of people don't realize, they think general semantics is only about language, but it's about perception as well. We've also made a very good connection with some folks in linguistics. Obviously, the hardcore folks are going to not be that into general semantics as coming from outside of their discipline, but with other folks, there's a group of eco-linguistics in Ukraine that have been made a very strong connection to.
Anything in the coaching space, or anything in just with what I've noticed is like the coaching industry's exploded over the last few years, and it's pulling from a lot of disciplines, and a lot of different training methodologies.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I always ground myself in has been the framework of general semantics as how we interact with ourselves in the world. And it's hard to escape how effective it is. And so
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if the Institute or yourself, you've noticed it or
Aware
seen.
of it, been aware of it. And, and again, there's the coaching part, and there's a kind of I'm a little hesitant to call it therapy because it's not technically, therapy. I mean, same thing, neurolinguistic programming
Right.
is in a similar sense. So, but adjacent to that, kind of human potential, self-improvement. Some of that also connects to Robert Anton Wilson, who was a big proponent of general semantics, and been hearing a lot of folks from the Robert Anton Wilson camp recently.
Okay.
So, we're aware of folks into coaching who are connected to the Institute, and we're trying to, we're doing what we can to make resources available, for that, and I think that, again, that the courses that we're running definitely are relevant and contributing to that.
Yeah, I just think about how my life would be different if I had been introduced to or been able to join a 3-day General Semantics Institute
Well,
seminar.
it's not too late.
No, it's not. I totally agree. And I just know the value that it would bring. Even this is right out of college, being an educator and being taught all these different pedagogies. It's often been the application of general semantics that has been
Yeah.
able to allow for kind of really powerful, really, really impactful teaching and really also really impactful learning.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that, again, we're working on, is to make educational resources available. And we're looking towards also to expanding our offerings, in terms of courses. So all of that is, what we've been involved in recent years.
And is needed. So strong vote here, and I will be looking out for 2026 dates.
Anything more you want to tell us about CORO?
No, the last word I'll offer, Lance, never the last word, right? Now you have me overthinking every word that I offer, which is the whole point of general semantics. I will just say, as we were finishing up, Keith and the program directors asked us, hey, can you provide a quote? We are going to do some brochures, and as are looking, it's best if there's some reflections from people that have gone through the process. And I'm usually not tight with my words and usually droll on. And this time I found a little pith, and I said, you won't regret it. Just come experience it. And I think what I've taken away from this conversation is the muscle of general semantics is only as effective as how often you're using it. And this just reminded me I need to be in practice more. So thanks. This has been an absolute gift for me.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot from both of you about your experiences and about CORO, and I guess it goes with the territory that you've asked some good questions and turned the tables a bit. I guess I have to put up with that, but I appreciate that. Uh, and I hope you guys can get involved with the Institute now. And, this is not the last word, but the first word, and that we can hear some more from you and have some more, have an ongoing relationship as we move into the future. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks so much,
Thank you,
Lance.
Ted. Thank you, Lance. This was great.
You've been listening to our August 2025 episode of Semantic Reactions, featuring Keith Clark and Ted Delicath. If you like what you've heard, or even if you haven't, please consider becoming a member of the Institute of General Semantics, if you're not one already. In addition to supporting our efforts, IGS members receive an annual subscription to our journal, etc., a review of general semantics, access to our online and in-person events, lectures, and seminars, and discounts on the books and audiovisual materials that we sell. Regular membership is only $50 and half off for students. Your membership and any additional donations you care to make will help to support our offerings and activities as we work to bring a measure of sanity to the world. The Institute of General Semantics is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to research and education on a wide range of topics. They include language and symbols, meaning and perception, communication and representation, media and technology, science and epistemology, creativity, and critical thinking. We are dedicated to making the world a better place through practical strategies for improving our semantic environment, individually and collectively. For more information about the Institute and our activities, and to become a member and supporter of our work, please visit our website at generalsemantics.org. That's General Semantics, one word, .org. And this brings to a close our 36th episode of Semantic Reactions, the official podcast of the Institute of General Semantics. This is Ben Houck, signing off, saying, we hope you'll join us next time. And until then, just remember this simple fact, that the map is not the territory.